Hello everyone. In the previous section, we have seen that proper management of large-scale open access renewable resources is challenging and it often fails. So when that happens, if these resources have a high market value, then if people are actually willing to pay for them, private markets can take over. A good example is ocean fisheries, which after a steady decline in the last century, are now being replaced by aquaculture around the world. But you may be asking yourself, is there some valuable open access resource that is both mismanaged by humans but not being replaced because people are just not willing to pay for it? So you might have an idea where this is going. So yes, clean air. The composition in the atmosphere has been relatively stable for millennia, but since the Industrial Revolution, humans have been emitting all kinds of pollutants, such as CO2, and in what we would call the free reservoir of clean air in the atmosphere. So just to see if you remember your public good classification, thinking of climate change, what type of good is clean air? Clean air is definitely non-excludable since anybody can breathe it or dump pollutants in it. In terms of rivalry, though, it depends. You breathing it doesn't exclude me from being able to breathe either. But if we think about pollution, then there's a clear limit to the amount of breathable or clean air available. So if a company emits some CO2 in the air, then this in terms eventually raises the temperature not only for present generations, for everybody, but also for all the future generations that will suffer from climate change. And unfortunately, well, it's rarely advantageous for any individual country or company to clean up air or to actively try to limit emissions. In this section, we will apply the dynamic open access resource model of the previous section to two apparently similar situations. So we'll end the section by looking at the very challenging situation of climate change. But just before, we will look at the Easter Island mystery to see if what happened in the past can foreshadow what may happen to current and future humanity. History provides many examples of cautionary tales of societies collapsing because of changes in the environment. So from the past, we have the example of the Mayans or of the antique civilizations of the Middle East. In recent times too, we have the example of Haiti, where most vegetation has been cut and disappeared, basically. And also, some people say that Rwanda has suffered environment degradation, which may have been a factor in the country's civil unrest since the 1990s. So could the global human civilization suffer a similar fate? So now we look at the famous example of Easter Island. Note the title. I wrote The Mystery of Easter Island. That's because I don't want to write history, because what happened still is not unsettled, and archaeologists are still working on it. The Polynesians call the Easter Island Rapa Nui. It's a 163.6 square kilometer island in the Pacific. So, and it's 3,200 kilometers west from the coast of Chile. So here I have placed it beside something more familiar to give a reference point. Its population was 2,100 inhabitants in the early 1990s. It's a triangle-shaped island consisting entirely of three volcanoes that rose from the sea. So the soil is volcanic and fertile, but porous. So that means that one, there are modest rainfalls, and two, when the water falls, then it's absorbed super quickly by the soil. So there are, in fact, no rivers. and it's also pretty windy. And in terms of resources, so it has some little fish resources, and so when early Europeans arrived, they found that the inhabitants cultivated sweet potatoes, sugarcane, and manioc. In the following slides, I don't want you to be passive and just listen. I would like you to be active and try to think like an archaeologist. What's fascinating is that we have both physical archaeological evidence and the diaries of the early European. So try to put together the pieces of the puzzle I'm providing as they were discovered by the Europeans, and try to imagine what may have happened on the island before and after their arrival. Also, keep that in mind when we actually present the different theories that try to explain the whole story of the Easter Island. The first European who discovered Easter Island was Jacob Roggeveen in 1722. I'm sure I'm pronouncing this perfectly. He was Dutch. He visited the island for a week, and since it was Easter, he named it Pasch Island, or in English, Easter Island, or in French, Île de Pâques. He estimated the inhabitants at between 2,000 and 3,000 and said they were mostly friendly and happy. He writes, a great many canoes came off to the ship. So also in his diary, the people had, to judge by appearances, no weapons, although, as I remarked, they relied in case of need on their idols or god, which stand erect all along the seashore in great number before they fall down and invoke them. Then came a Spanish explorer, Felipe González de Haedo, in 1770, and his account is pretty similar. He estimates that the inhabitants were roughly 3,000 and non-violent. This is a picture by Hodges. It was a painter that was with James Cook. So he was the next European explorer to visit the island in 1774. He visited for a week, and what's nice is he provided a systematic account of Easter Island and that he brought artists. He said the inhabitants of the island did not seem to exceed 600 or 700 souls. Note that this is strange. The Spanish explorers said that they were maybe 3,000, so maybe they were exaggerating, but this looks unusual for an explorer because that's their job, is to count things and account for stuff properly. But okay, let's continue. He says not one of them had so much as a stick or a weapon, so non-violent, of any sort in their hands. And about the statues, of course, they were extremely visible. So he says the gigantic statues so often mentioned are not, in my opinion, looked upon as idols by the present inhabitants, whatever they might have been in the days of the Dutch. So here he already had read the diaries of the Dutch explorers, which said that they looked upon the statues as idols. Here he says, at least I saw nothing that could induce me to think so. On the contrary, I rather suppose that they are burying places for certain tribes or families. As well as some others, saw a human skeleton lying in one of the platform, just covered with stone. And if you look closely at the painting, then yes, we can see that the painter included some bones there. So it looks a bit mysterious. What's happening is the picture is starting to get blurrier. The next explorer came in 1786. It was Jean-François de Gallo, Comte de la Pérouse. You can presume from his name that he was French. He also brought artists. This artwork is by Gaspard Duché de Vancy. He made an amazing discovery that, in fact, Polynesians look exactly like white Europeans in the Garden of Eden, maybe. Or another hypothesis is that this is how he learned to draw everybody in art school. So you be the judge. So de la Pérouse stayed for a single day, but still he had time to make this interesting observation. So reading from his diary. Un long séjour à l'île de France, qui ressemble si fort à l'île de Pâques, m'a appris que les arbres n'y repoussent jamais, à moins d'être abrités des vents de la mer par d'autres arbres ou par des enseignes de murailles. Et c'est cette connaissance qui m'a découvert la cause de la dévastation de l'île de Pâques. Les habitants de cette île ont bien moins à se plaindre des éruptions de leur volcan, éteints depuis longtemps, que de leur propre imprudence. Since this is in a foreign language, let me just summarize briefly what he's saying. So back then, even de la Pérouse was already speculating that maybe there used to be a forest on the island, but it may have disappeared because of human exploitation. So this one is an engraving by Bernard Direx. The theme of human bones and ruins start to dominate again. So this is the Easter Island mystery. There are 887 moai scattered all over the island. The tallest moai is about 10 meters and weighs 82 tons. So that's the weight of a fully loaded Boeing 737. And the heaviest under construction is estimated at 175 tons, but so that's the weight of a house. And it would have been 21 meter tall, so that's taller than the Sphinx of Giza, but it was never finished. So how could a Neolithic society just, first of all, survive on such a small and apparently desolate island? And of course, how could a few thousand individuals accomplish such a feat of engineering and transportation without levers, rollers, ropes, or wooden sled? Because if you think of some statue like the Sphinx, it was built in place right there. But all these statues, they had to be transported from the quarry to the shore or the seaside. So how could they transport that is extremely mysterious. According to experts in statue transportation, so even 3,000 people could not have moved the largest statues without the benefit of wooden sled and levers. So for a time, archaeologists have speculated about that. So what may have happened in the island? So I will not talk about the most popular theory.